verse 28. But what do you think? A man had 2 sons, and he came to the first and said, Son, go work today in the vineyard. And he answered, I will not. But afterward he regretted it and went. The man came to the second and said the same thing, and he answered, I will, sir. But he did not go. Which of the 2 did the will of his father? And they said, the first. Jesus said to them, Truly I say to you that the tax collectors and prostitutes will get into the kingdom of God before you. For John came to you in the way of righteousness, and you did not believe him. But the tax collectors and prostitutes did believe him. And you, seeing this, did not even feel remorse afterward, so as to believe him. So Jesus, in the next few parables or whatever, he really lays it on the people who should know better. The people who have all the studying, they have all the oracles of God, they're able to read and write. They know what the book says. They're supposed to know what it says, but yet they are not. They don't recognize it when a man of God comes. We studied last week. The Gospel of John. The teachings of John the Baptist is. Well, did it come from heaven or did it come from man? Well, we can't tell because they didn't believe him, but then they didn't know what to tell him because they said if they said it come from heaven, and he said, why didn't you believe it? And he said it came from man, and the people's all going to rise up against it because the regular people thought that John is a prophet, and he was. So he says here, a man has 2 sons. He tells the first one, you go work. And he said, no, I'm not going, but he's turned around and did. And the second one, he said, I will, but he didn't. And he said, you know what John said, the tax collectors and the prostitutes, which are the 2 are the as far as the Jews were concerned, were the lowest in class, I guess you would say, of people. But yet they all understood, they listened to John and listened to his teaching, and they changed their ways. What makes the tax collectors so reviled? That's all usually it says tax collectors and sinners. The King James will say publicans and sinners. What makes the tax collector be so reviled, you think? They cheated people?
They work for the Roman government.
They keep some of it for themselves.
Keep some for themselves. Work for the Roman government. I think that might be more. Tax collectors as a whole has never been looked upon favorably, even in society today. If you've ever been audited, you know what I'm talking about. Because they've got an attitude on their own, and but it's not saying that they're breaking the law, but they've got their own attitude. Many of them do. But tax collectors, as general, have always been looked down upon. But Jesus said the tax collectors and the prostitutes, these are the 2, as far as Jews are concerned, these are the 2 lowest forms of people. And said that they're in better shape than you are because they listened to John and changed their ways. The next parable is about the wicked vine growers. You notice that in that day and time, there's a lot of emphasis on growing grapes and wine. That must have been the thing to have as a vineyard, evidently. Why would wine be so important to that society?
Water was not good quality.
The water water was not good quality, for one thing. One deal I read years ago said they had a recipe that you put in so many parts wine to so many parts water, and it would kind of purify the alcohol in it would purify the water, kill the bacteria and whatever, and it also would help neutralize the acid content in the water.
I guess they didn't have any vinegar back then.
Evidently, well, I don't know, it didn't talk about vinegar, does it?
That's kind of like wine, only it's not got any alcohol.
No, I don't have any alcohol in it.
Apparently, when Christ was on the cross and says that they filled a sponge full of vinegar.
Well, that's true.
Wasn't wine used for a lot of ceremonies also? in
Wine was
Israel?
used for ceremonies, yes.
Because when Jesus performed the miracle, his first miracle of, wine at the wedding in Cana, his mother was upset because they didn't have, wine was running out.
Yeah.
Wasn't she? And so she wanted him, to help with that.
Okay. You got to remember, this is an age. There's no refrigeration whatsoever, and so to have a drink that you could offer to people and feel safe that it wasn't going to make them sick, this would be one that you could, because it pretty well sterilized itself when it was made. Yes.
Was it always fermented, or did some of it not fermented?
That's a good question. Was it always fermented, or according to a class I was in years ago, they did have a recipe to preserve the grape juice without it fermenting, but by and large it was all alcoholic.
Hey, Virgil,
Yes.
chapter, 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 23, he's telling Timothy there to drink no longer water, but use a little wine for your stomach's sake and your often infirmities.
Okay. That's one of the instances where, according to a commentary, that where Timothy was, the water was very bad, and it would kind of neutralize some of the impurities in the water and the acid content in it, and make it where it was more drinkable. Now, going back to Janice's question, because years ago, many people, Jesus wouldn't drink regular wine; he had to be drinking grape juice. Well, it calls it wine everywhere. I don't think anybody, the Bible speaks against getting drunk, so I don't, that.
It says, it doesn't say don't drink, it
Yeah.
says don't drink into drunkenness.
Yeah, don't get drunk. So but it was a reason for it, that they didn't have any way to refrigerate or keep things.
Well, we know that Lot's daughters got him drunk.
Lot daughter got down and said you could. It was possible to get someone drunk on it, but then if you mixed it with water, as it seemed to be the case in most of the cases, then you couldn't hold enough of it to get falling down drunk.
In researching it just now, it says that the wine mentioned in the Old Testament was always referring to an alcoholic product of fermented grapes. And if they were non-fermented, then it would be called grape juice. They would not use the word wine for it.
Okay.
So they had a different, but everything in the Old Testament.
And they had a different word for it they would have used if it was just grape juice. Okay.
Yeah. So they evidently had both.
Yeah. But the recipe that I mentioned, so I don't remember what kind of class I was in, but anyway, it was, you put it, of course, they didn't put it in jars, they put it in skins because it could work. But anyway, they took it and threw it in a pond with weights on it where it sinks to the bottom, and had a rope and let it where it's cooler. And they had so many days they left it in there, and then when they pulled it out, it was grape juice. It wouldn't run, but it didn't turn alcoholic either.
And one thing that's important to remember with all of it is even the grape juice, the wine that was fermented didn't have to have a lot of ferment, so it didn't have to be have a high alcoholic content to keep it preserved.
Yeah,
And so we don't know for sure. I mean, everyone has their own theory to how much, but it doesn't have to have a bunch, have a lot high
Yeah.
alcoholic content to even keep it preserved.
to keep it preserved, okay?
Mark 2:22 talks about old wine and new wine, talk about now using, putting new wine in old skins because it burst.
Yeah, the skin, yeah. The old King James said put new wine in old bottles, but then that didn't matter make any sense to me because if you was in the age where we were, we recanned stuff, well, we'd empty out all the old stuff and can it again in the same jars. But the King James mistranslated it because it should have said skins instead of bottles. And it would have been because the skin could give, a fresh skin could give, whereas the old skin had gotten brittle and it would break when it went to working. Anyway, now we're going to start on the wicked vine growers. Listen to another parable. There was a landowner who planted a vineyard and put a wall around it and dug a wine press in it and built a tower and rented it out to vine growers and went on a journey. When the harvest time approached, he sent his slaves to the vineyard. He sent his slaves to the vine growers to receive his produce. The vine growers took his slaves and beat one and killed another and stoned a third. Again, he sent another group of slaves larger than the first, and they did the same thing to them. But afterward he sent his son to them, saying, they will respect my son. But when the vine growers saw the son, they said among themselves, this is the heir, come, let us kill him and seize his inheritance. They took him and threw him out of the vineyard and killed him. Therefore, when the owner of that vineyard comes, what will he do to those vine growers? They said to him, he will bring those wretches to a wretched end, and will rent out the vineyard to other vine growers who will pay him the proceeds at the proper seasons. Jesus said to them, did you never read in the scriptures, the stone which the builders rejected, this became the chief cornerstone. This came about from the Lord and is marvelous in our eyes. Therefore I say to you, the kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given to a people producing the fruit of it. And he who falls on this stone will be broken to pieces. To whomever it falls, it will scatter him like dust. When the chief priests and Pharisees heard his parables, they understood that he was speaking about them. When they sought to seize him, they feared the people because they considered him to be a prophet. The people considered him a prophet, not the leaders. He's telling us a story about a vine grower, but he's talking about them. God gave you a country, had you built a great big city, put a wall around it, had a temple in it, set you over it. Every time you'd get to acting up, he would send a prophet or a servant, if you will, say y'all need to straighten up. Some of them they beat them, some of them they killed them, some of them they run them off. He said, I'll send my son, which was Jesus. He said, here's the heir, we'll just get rid of him. So they took him outside down and killed him. That's what they did to Jesus. But he said, I'll give it to somebody else. That's when the church, the Jews were no longer God's chosen people. Everybody was God's chosen people if you obeyed the new way, if you followed Christ and not Moses. It didn't make any difference who your ancestor was to be able to get the oracles of God anymore. Because the mission of God to bring someone through Abraham to be a perfect sacrifice was completed in Jesus, and now they were not needed anymore for that purpose. So you stop and just if you're looking for something to read some of the prophets. Read them all. That's if you It takes a while, and then, and the prophets were there, and they, you think, well, they got a book in the Bible, that's got their name on it. But when in this lifetime, they wasn't looked on very favorably by most of the people.
It's
Well, I'm-
because they were saying things that people didn't want to hear.
They were saying things that people didn't want to hear. Right now, my reading is in Jeremiah, and they got Jeremiah locked up, and he can't even go see the king anymore. So he dictates what God told him to another fella, and I can't remember their names. I probably couldn't pronounce them if I remember them. Said, you go tell this. He said, write down exactly this is what God says. And so that some people heard it and said, the king needed to hear this. So he goes and he's reading it to the king. And it says it's cold time of year and there's a fire in the room. And every 4 or 5 pages, if you will, the king would take his knife and cut that out and throw it in the fire. Because he didn't want to hear it. Are we like that today? I know that's what he said, but I didn't want to hear it, so I'm just not going to pay any attention to it. A lot of people that way. Some of us maybe we think, oh no, we're not that way, but you get, well, why aren't you doing this over here? Well, I really don't like to do that over there, so I think I'll just forget about that. But he was literally cutting it out of the scroll and throw it in the fire. Jeremiah chapter 36. It's pretty close to where it's at. Just, I don't want to hear that, so I just thought they didn't believe it. And Nebuchadnezzar took them over. If you guys straighten up, God might hold him back. Your armies aren't going to hold him back. Oh yeah, God's for us. But they kept on worshiping Baal, and God finally had enough. Leland, you got any questions on this before I turn the page? Okay. Y'all are all witnesses.
The Pharisees didn't have any trouble understanding everything he said in the parables, did they?
No, they knew what he was saying. They just didn't want to. They were so jealous of his popularity that they just didn't want to. They didn't want to hear it.
He was gonna take their power.
He's going to take their power because they are the upper crust of their society. They got invited to the right parties. They got invited to the right meetings. Got to sit in the choicest seats. Everything that politically and economically and strategically that you'd want as far as in society, they had it.
They were not humble.
Huh?
They were not humble.
No, they were not humble. Yeah, that's right.
Christ said it himself, they were more worried about being seen by men.
Yes.
And when you get to this, that starts this whole conversation, when they were deliberating on how to answer Christ initially, it wasn't what was right and what was wrong, it was what are people going to think about what we say.
Yeah, well, the people will think what we say. You're right. Okay, next week will be singing night, I believe. So the next time will be the 17th. I believe the date's 3rd, isn't it? We'll try to start on chapter 22.